So do we want to leave the door open or close it? Open. Okay, open. Okay. All right. Just don't mind the screaming from the soccer game. All right. So our talk for today is called Wholeness, and that is actually our theme for the month. Part of our global vision is that we see our world with an understanding of wholeness. We see our world with an understanding of wholeness. So the theme of this month is wholeness. And our book is a wonderful book called Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change. Yes, by Pema Chodron. So here's a quote from our founder, Ernest Holmes. "The Spirit of God is an undivided and indivisible wholeness. It fills all time with its presence, bless you, and all space with the activity of its thought. Everyone is an incarnation of God, and a unique incarnation. All are rooted in the one life. Your endeavor, then, is not so much to find God as it is to realize God's presence and to understand that this presence is always with you. Nothing can be nearer to you than that which is the very essence of your being. Your outward search culminates in the greatest of all possible discoveries, finding God at the center of your own being. Life flows up from within you. Life flows up from within you." Now, one of the things interfering with this realization of the presence of God is that we have been raised in the West. And the West has a tradition, and you might say, well, it has a tradition of the Judeo-Christian mindset. And in the Judeo-Christian mindset, and you could say, well, I don't have a religion. I didn't go to church. I wasn't raised with a religion. If you're in this culture, it is part of the culture. You don't even realize that it's part of the culture. I remember when I was a little girl, my mom would come in the morning, she'd say, "Rise and shine." Did you ever hear that expression? Isaiah. "Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you." It was just shortened to "rise and shine." But it's right there, it's embedded. And so embedded in that is our creation story. Now, if we look at the first 5 books of the Old Testament, we call the Old Testament, that's called the Torah. That is the Old Testament. It is the first 5 books of the Bible. And the first one is Genesis, and it is about how the world was created. Now, in the Bible, in Genesis, one after the other, there are 2 versions of creation. Now, people tend to sort of ignore that. But there are 2 versions of creation, and the first one is sort of talking about evolution. First, there was light. Then there was water. Then there was earth. Then there were plants. Then there were fish and, beings that walked on the land. And then there were these 2 beings that were created. And God says he created man, because man with a capital M, referring to humanity. Man and woman, he created them. Same time, same place, man and woman, he created them, and he called it all good, and then he took a rest. He took a day off, right? So the idea of Sabbath is one of the great gifts of the Judeo-Christian culture, because nobody else has that kind of thing that says you get a day of rest. Not that we take it, but we get it. But God saw it all, created it all, and called it all good. But then we had this other story, the story where God is creating man, And then man and God are walking in the garden, having a lovely time, but there's no partner for man. So he waits till Adam's asleep, he takes his rib and creates a woman. And that's when the trouble begins. Because this serpent comes along, and the serpent says, why can't you eat that fruit? And God told us not to. Well, it's really tasty. It's good for you. You should eat it. So he says, well, I'm always looking for good food for my husband because I'm his helpmate. I was created to help him. So I'm going to see if I can try out this food, which might be helpful. Except that, of course, when they ate of it, then they both saw they were naked and started sewing fig leaves, for God's sake. and then they ended up getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden, kicked out of the garden. And cursed, not just kicked out, but cursed. You're going to work hard, and you're going to have pain in childbirth, and I'm so pissed off at you guys. So, every Bible, no matter what religion, every religion has a sacred text, and that sacred text contains truth, and it also contains a bunch of myth and a bunch of stories. And the story that we are stuck with is that we have been kicked out of the garden, that the world is a mess, and our job now is supposed to be fixing it. We're supposed to mend the world. There's a magazine published by Rabbi Michael Lerner called Tikkun, and it means putting together the pieces that are broken. So we see the world as broken and ourselves as flawed beings born with, and in the Catholic religion, you are born with original sin, and you have to be baptized in order to cleanse yourself of that original sin, which is the sin of Adam and Eve. And that is also a story about not taking responsibility. Because, the snake made me do it, she made me do it, everybody's not taking responsibility for their own actions. So here we are, stuck with this story that we have we're born, flawed and evil and who knows what, and you look at a little teeny baby and you're saying, what's wrong with that story? This baby looks really beautiful and loving and joyful and curious and ready to explore the world and enjoy itself and taste its toes and anything else it can get its hands on. And so, so we realize there is some kind of dichotomy, there's some kind of thing going on here. Could it be that the world is actually whole? That the world is, and nature is, whole. And that we actually were born whole. And that what happened was we were told these stories that said we were not whole. I remember being in the Catholic Church, and I don't know if they still do this, but we would pound our chest, pound our heart, and say, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. I am worthy. We are all worthy. We are all whole at our core. And so what we need to do is to let go of anything that says that's not so. To realize our wholeness. And the thing about that is also, do we make mistakes? Yes. Do we do things that turn out to be failures? Yes. This is how we learn. We try things, and when they don't work, we have to try other things. the action of failure does not make us personally a failure. Failure is not a noun applying to people. It applies to activities that people attempt. We say there is no sin but a mistake. Remembering that the word sin is an archery term, meaning missed the mark. When you missed the mark, it was called a sin. And then we took it to a whole other level, but it really means we tried something and it didn't fly. It didn't work. Something happened, and we had to try something else. Nature can heal itself. We know this. Our bodies can heal themselves. We cut our finger, and as long as we cooperate with the healing, we don't continue to open the wound or, rub dirt in it or whatever. We cooperate with the healing by cleaning it and bandaging it or whatever we need to do. We cooperate with the healing. The body will heal itself. And it heals from the inside out. Do you notice that? It heals your cut. It heals your wound from the inside out. Everything can be healed from the inside out. The pattern of perfection is present. In the body, we call it homeostasis. It's how the body knows how to restore balance, how to bring things back into alignment. And that happens in nature as well. I remember hearing the story of during the Cold War. Of course, we had East Germany and West Germany. And between them, there was a no man's land with guard towers and things like that that people used to try to escape across. But they had this huge no man's land that people were not allowed to go to. Now, on both sides of this no man's land, they were building apartments and houses and all that kind of stuff. On both sides, they were building things, having construction and all that kind of stuff. And then the Cold War ended. And guess what? The whole no man's land, which nobody had been on, had turned into a parkland. It had trees and grasses and bushes and flowers and birds, and all kinds of beings had returned to this open space, to this land, because the land knows how to restore itself, how to make itself whole. We know that you can build the sidewalk, and if there is a crack in that sidewalk, there will be some grass coming up. Growth wants to happen. Nature wants to grow and be and express. And so do we. We want to grow and to express and to be who we are, whole, perfect, and complete. And so, in this little book, Living Beautifully, she talks about this essence, this realization that we are whole. We're created, it's said that we're created in God's image. That means that we have the power to think, and through the gifts that Spirit has given us, through our imagination, through our intuition, through our creativity, through our humor, we are able to invite something new to show up and to be present in our experience and in our lives. So in that way, we are created in that image of God. We are co-creating our reality. And so what we're saying is everything that is here now in this realm of manifestation, in this realm of existence, everything is a result of a thought, and it's a result of the thought we had. So we had a thought, and this is what resulted. So if we don't like what we're seeing, we have to have a new thought. we have to have a new idea about what has to happen. Now, the thing that Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change talks about is that one of the things that we as human beings hate most about our lives is that everything changes all the time. And we're looking for some place of stability, some place of safety, some place where we can just sort of take a breath and chill, you know, and say, okay, everything's cool now. Let's just hold everything right there, and it'll be perfect. Okay, we'll keep it right here, and everything will be fine. No, not the way it works. Not the way it works, and not the way it should work. I studied systems theory when I was in graduate school, and systems theory says if you have a closed system, you have entropy, which means everything goes from order to chaos. So open systems allow newness in, and they allow oldness out, and that's how they continue and they thrive, because they are open. They're willing to change. They're not resisting the change. They're just saying, how can I be riding this wave instead of engulfed by it? So we are becoming life surfers. Okay? I have to say, I just heard a little thing on NPR this morning about this girl who was a surfer from the age of 5 to the age of 17 in the Gaza. A Palestinian girl was a surfer. But now she's turned 17 and her parents have found her a husband, and she has to give up her surfing. You know, Syrian refugees who are coming here and finding work and finding places to live, they are experiencing more freedom than they have ever had. I heard about a Syrian refugee who was a pastry chef in Aleppo. He made it somehow to the United States, and you know that's at least a 2-year process to go through the vetting process to get here. And so he has a place to live with his family, and he got a job as a pastry chef here. And he said, they said, what's the difference? He says, America, chocolate. But he said, you know, in Syria, it was all corruption. It was all who you knew. It was all being a part of the elite. And if you wanted to get a job or do anything, you had to be connected. And if you weren't connected to that elite, he said, here, anybody could do it. Anybody could, you know, maybe someday I could have my own bakery. That was not even a possibility for him in Syria at all. So we forget sometimes how blessed we are to be here with all of our flaws, with all of the stuff going on. This place is more free than any other place, because America is more than a country. It's an idea. It's an idea about the nature of human beings as being equal, as being deserving, and having a right to freedom. Having a right to freedom. And having the responsibility that goes with the freedom. Taking responsibility for using our freedom wisely. So, in this book, she talks about how we navigate our queasiness with the uncertainty of life. And in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they start out with 3 commitments. And the first commitment is called the Pratimoksha vow. And it is a commitment not to do harm with our actions or words or thoughts. A commandment to be good to each other. So that sort of relates to our golden rule. Don't do anything to anybody else that you wouldn't want them to do to you. So be good to each other. First commandment. Second one is a commitment to dedicate our lives and keep our hearts and minds open to nurturing our compassion with the longing to ease the suffering of the world. To nurture our compassion with a longing to ease the suffering of the world. And most of our suffering comes from our weird beliefs and our clashing beliefs and our belief that we have to have it our way, that our way is the only way. So when we see people that we call fundamentalists who say, this is the only way, she encourages us to remember that we all have that in us, that we all have a little fundamentalist tendency about something that we think this is the only right way. If you don't eat gluten-free, you are, I don't know what, you are headed for destruction. You know, if you're gluten intolerant, good, you're identified that, but you don't have to say everybody has to be gluten-free. You know, there is a fundamentalism that we can each adopt about our own little righteousness, our own righteousness about something. So, and the third vow is a resolve to embrace the world just as it is without bias. Ooh. It's a commitment to see everything we encounter, good and bad, pleasant and painful, as a manifestation of awakened energy. It is a commitment to see anything and everything as a means by which we can awaken further. Everything is an opportunity for awakening. Now, that does not mean that we let somebody, ride roughshod over us. It means that we have to find a new way of interacting with each other. We have tried war and revenge for a very long time, and it doesn't seem to be bringing us peace. Have you noticed that? So what if we could actually decide to do something entirely different? The other thing I heard this morning while I was making my breakfast was a conversation, and it was a bunch of women who got together, and there were Trump people, and there were Hillary people, and there were independent people, undecided people, all of those folks together, having a conversation, respecting one another's views, hearing each other and their concerns and their heart's desires and what they hoped for, and coming together in that way, listening to each other respectfully, gave the people who attended that hope. It was like, oh, if we could listen to each other and express our concerns and realize that we both had the same concern, we're just approaching it from a different direction. And so let's think about that concern that we have instead of which way is the right way. Maybe there's another way where we can all come together to create that something new. The other thing is mindfulness. We practiced that in our wonderful retreat this weekend at Ananda. And we were able to work through painful things, work through things that were causing us to suffer, thoughts and beliefs that were causing us to suffer. And so mindfulness is a way of being present in the now. And when we're in the now, we're connecting with that which is always in the now, which is that presence of God that Ernest Holmes spoke of. Because that presence lives in the eternal now. It's not worrying about the future. It's not perseverating on the past. It is being present here now and knowing what is ours to do. What is the next step? That which is in front of us. That which is right here in front of us is the next step to take. So it's so interesting that we are in this place where last week there was such an experience of great joy when the Cubs won the World Series for the first time in 108 years. Now, whether you are a baseball fan or you're not a baseball fan, those people not only won a game, they overcame a curse. They had a belief that they were cursed. And as long as they carried that belief, but somehow they went through and they were able to let go of that old belief and boom, won the game. Won the game. Now we are going to be having an election. And the question is, can we be that mindful presence of God in the midst of whatever the outcome is? Can we stay centered in love and connection? Can we stay centered in love and connection? Kathy Mann was talking about a story that she saw about a school in Washington, D.C. that was experiencing a lot of violence. So what they did was they had two young men come in, and it was African-American men, this African-American school primarily, and they came in and began to teach mindfulness in one of the classes. They would just stop and just had time to just breathe and be quiet and be still. And so the kids got into that place. And they were able to set aside a mindfulness room. So if there was a conflict, they put the two kids in the mindfulness room, and they had to sit there and breathe and hold each other's hand. And so now if there's any conflict, they go to the mindfulness room, and now it's spread to the whole school. And so when there's a disruption, a conflict, they go to the mindfulness room and they sit together and they hold hands and they come out resolved to be friends, to be connected. Regardless of what happens this week, we have to resolve to remember to stay connected, to keep listening, to listen to our heart, most of all, to let love lead us, to let love lead us past whatever conflicts may be coming up, and to realize that America is more than a country. It is an idea that is greater than any individual. And we have to hold that high intention, that realization of freedom, that realization of life, that realization of peace, that realization of goodness and inclusion is what we are about. We hold that high intention. And as we do, we uplift not only ourselves individually, but we uplift the collective consciousness as well. And that is a very, very good thing. And so our affirmation for this week, which is, I believe, on page 2, is, I embrace the realization that I am whole. 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 And so it is.